Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Just excited to have you here talking to me. Like I mentioned, your podcast, every time I see one, I'm like, yep, that is important to know. You do such a great job over there on TikTok talking, and I wanted to have you here today. But let's just get some like basics out of the way first. Can you just give us a little bit of just background on how you decided to get into elder law and estate planning? What's your journey there?
You're going to love this answer. So, my family has been in Tampa since 1891. We were imported from Sicily to be cigar labor back in the cigar baron days. And so my family's been here ever since. When I decided to go to law school, I wanted to practice in an area where I could have a positive impact on as many people in my hometown and my community as I could. And when I was in law school, I realized estate planning, more transactional, so many people need it. Not even thinking about elder law in the moment, but just wills and trusts and creating efficiency in the estate administration process. So I started with general estate planning, and then doing that for probably 2 or 3 years. Then I started realizing, well, clients are passing away and I was sending out the probates. So I figured like, well, for those folks that don't plan their estate to avoid probate, like I'll pick up that work. And then I started having clients that were not passed away yet, but certainly not as healthy as they were when I met them. And I was sending out the elder law work. And so years before I got married, I was literally, people ask, how did you become an elder law attorney? And I'm like, online dating. Figure out that one. So I received a message on an online dating platform from a woman over in the Orlando market. And she said, hey, I'm a lawyer too. We should meet for drinks. And I said, well, I'm in Tampa. You're in Orlando. And she said, I'll drive to Tampa. I said, I'll buy you a drink. That date was very interesting. And she said, tell me about your practice. And I said, well, I do estate planning and probate. And she said, do you do elder law? I said, no. She said, you're an idiot. I said, awesome. This date's going really well. So ended up nothing romantic ever came out of that relationship, but she became my mentor. And she was very generous with her time. She said, let me explain to you how elder law works, why you want to do it from a revenue perspective as a business owner, and really how many families that you can positively impact and leave them in a better place than you found them. And if you're already doing the estate planning for them, they're already comfortable using you and trusting you. So learn elder law. So she helped me get VA accredited. So now we do VA benefits for veterans and widows of veterans, specifically to pay for in-home care, assisted living, memory care. And we do the Medicaid stuff for in-home care, assisted memory, and the dreaded nursing home. We've done over 7,000 Medicaid asset protection cases. We've never had a denial. Sheltered over $3 billion for Florida seniors that otherwise would have been needed to be paid down on care. And I've done $10,000 families. I've done $12 million families. Florida happens to be the best state in the country if you need care because our rules and our laws are the most relaxed and most favorable to avoiding the 5-year look back period, avoiding the spend down, avoiding the tax issues. And so it really has become the cornerstone of my practice.
Thank you so much for that. A little background, good little stories in there. So thank you for sharing. But since you brought it up, I do want to talk about just the difference between elder law and estate planning. What are the differences there, and why? So you kind of mentioned how you were in estate planning and you added elder law, but just kind of give us a little thing. What's the difference?
Yeah, huge distinction. I analogize the distinction between elder law attorneys and general estate planners to the medical field, where we can all appreciate that all cardiologists are MDs, but not all MDs are cardiologists. Well, in my world, all elder law attorneys are estate planners, but general estate planners definitely are not elder law attorneys. And it gets really confusing for people because we both produce documents that have the same name. So the big one that everybody knows about, durable power of attorney. Everybody knows, like, hey, mom's memory's starting to slip. I need a power of attorney for her. So they rush out to online services or even to a general estate planner in their area. And they go, oh, this guy's got 5-star rating as an estate planner. Got a power of attorney for mom. Check that box. I'm good. Well, the problem is general estate planners here in Florida will often give you a power of attorney document that is 5 to 12 pages in length. My powers of attorney are 32 to 35 pages for a document that has the exact same name. However, it's a difference in substance because the general power of attorney given by a general estate planner does not have elder law or asset protection language, which means you slip on that banana peel, you end up in the nursing home, And your agent only has the authority to start writing checks out of your assets for 10 to 20,000 a month for your nursing home until you go broke or you pass away, versus having an elder law set of documents already in place that day one, we can save 100% of your home, vehicles, cash in the bank, investments, and retirement. No 5-year look back period, no spend down, no taxes. So the results of having one document versus the other are vastly different if you need care as you get older. But the general public doesn't know that. And they say, well, I got a power of attorney. That's what I was told I needed. So I'm good to go. Murphy's Law is that the same stroke that puts your family member in the nursing home or puts you in the nursing home is the same stroke that takes away their legal capacity to sign new documents. And if you're stuck with documents that don't have the right language, whether they're out of state documents, old documents, I literally still, people go to bookstores, believe it or not, and I get the, Staples power of attorney fill in the blank form that's 2 pages, and they take it and they get it witnessed and notarized and they feel good. And then they bring it to me and they say, hey, you're the best elder law attorney in Florida. And I've heard you could save all dad's money. And I look at the power of attorney and I go, well, not with this one. And by the way, now dad doesn't have capacity. I can't help you. And that's the problem.
Well, and I think that's something that's really important to bring up, that these documents, they are not all created equally, even if they have the same name. There's ones that have different language, different, even in power of attorney, there's durable power of attorneys, general power of attorney, there's like different powers of attorney. There's medical surrogate, there's, all this different kind of stuff. And so rather than trying to figure it out on your own with, a Google search bar, it's worth the time and effort to go speak to a person who does elder law. And I think that's so very important. I also interviewed someone several months back that talked about, when we think about estate planning, like in my head, estate is something that, is in Pride and Prejudice. Like I don't think about it like just that not everybody has an estate, right? That these are, for rich people, and if you're not rich, you don't have to worry about estate planning. But what Adam Zuckerman of Buried in Work talked about was, he said, if you're over 18 and you have clothes on, if you have clothes, if you live somewhere, if you drive a car, if you have a car that's yours, that's an estate. And so what happens to your estate, either if you're incapacitated or when you're no longer here, that's estate planning. And so I say that to bring up the point that like everybody could use at least a conversation with an an elder law person and or an estate planner. Would you say that?
Absolutely. And to the point that your other guest had, absolutely right. Taking time and going through probate is inefficient at best. It takes time, costs money, and honestly, it hits the lower socioeconomic people harder than it does the very rich ones. So if you think about, here in Florida, for a full administration probate, our minimum attorney fee is about $7,000. So if you were to die with $100,000 total in assets, which by any stretch is not like Vanderbilt money, you're going to get hit with $7,000 of your $100,000 just on the attorney fee. And here in Florida, we also have court costs, filing fees, publication fees, bond, paralegal fees, and personal representative fees. So on a $100,000 estate, $7,000 just for the attorney fee is a good chunk of your money. If you have a $10 million estate, and now the attorney fee in Florida jumps to 3%, well, yeah, $300,000, but you still have $9.7 million going to your family. So nobody likes the haircut, but your family's probably not going to be hurting too much after that administration versus somebody that only has $50,000 or $100,000 that gets clipped for 20% of what they have just going to the administrative process. So absolutely, it does make sense to plan however that works. Also, I tell my clients, and I do it for free for all of my estate planning clients, we do powers of attorney, healthcare documents for your children and grandchildren as soon as they turn 18. Because what you don't realize as a parent, if your child gets in a car accident at 17 years old and gets rushed to the hospital, well, you show up at the ER and you are legal mama bear. When they turn 18, you are biological mama bear, but you are not legal mama bear. And technically, without a HIPAA release and without the authority to go in there and start calling the shots, they probably won't talk to you, or they're going to make it much more difficult. So even for your 18-year-olds, they always have that hold my beer and watch this moment in college and then end up in the emergency room. So we want to maintain that ability to take care of them. Now, obviously at 18, they're their own client. If they say my parents are idiots and I'm going to name my girlfriend, they can do that. But at least there's somebody that they can choose. Last point I want to make is I give all of my clients elder law documents, even if you're not elderly, because first of all, there's no definition of that. And secondly, I have a client right now that's 35 years old in a nursing home after being hit by a motor vehicle on his bicycle. And he's in the same nursing home as my 85-year-old that had a stroke. So age in and of itself isn't the determining factor of the quality of documents you should have. Think about, if you remember the Terry Schiavo case, here in Florida 30 years ago, she was in her late 20s when she ended up in a persistent vegetative state. So while statistically less likely while you're younger, she could have benefited from elder law documents. My 35-year-old that's in the nursing home right now did benefit from elder law documents. And I don't think under anybody's definition, a 32-year-old when he got hit by a car is considered elderly. So it's really more asset protection, but it gets lumped into this elder law moniker, which I think could be misleading for some younger folks.
Well, and that's such a good point too, because in my caregiving journey, my mother got sick when I was 8. So in 1984, that's when she was diagnosed with her disease. We had decades of me and my stepdad trying to do all the things. And it wasn't until, my stepdad was out of the picture. She's getting, I'm now in my 40s, I was in my 40s then, in 2014, she's, getting to where she needs more and more help. And we were fortunate enough and she was really the spearhead of saying, we need to make sure that, and really like all she had was like her house. That was it. There was nothing else. She was already on Social Security, disability, and things like that. And she was going to end up needing Medicaid. And she knew that ahead of time. And so, she passed away this year. She was only 78 years old. So all of this was happening, when she was like you said, young,
Not defined as elderly, right?
Yeah. Yeah. She barely, got over that marker. But, to your point, this is about protecting yourself and your ability to get the care that you deserve. And then, of course, the assets that you have that you want to protect. And, I think a lot of people, they think they've got it all under control. I see this, and you probably see it on TikTok too, where people are like, Medicaid's just taking they're just taking every hard-earned thing that my parents ever did. And then just they're, and it's like, well, I mean, that's the rules. And it's, but there are other rules that are in place and other ways that you can work within the system to save some of the assets. And I think a lot of people sometimes feel like it's somehow dodgy or sketchy to, quote, protect the assets, even though what you're doing is all part of the legal process.
I analogize that. I get that all the time. You're a terrible person. How could you take money from taxpayers? And I tell them, listen, what we do is the same as what good tax professionals do. So for instance, when you have a child, you get a tax break. I don't know how many people say like, I did have this child and I'm eligible for this tax credit, but the government's really bad with money and I feel like I'm taking advantage of the taxpayer. So I'm going to tell the IRS no thank you on that tax break for having a child because I just don't feel right about it. Well, I've done this thousands of times and I have never once had a family. Everybody likes to throw rocks from the peanut gallery before the time comes. When they're staring at the $10,000 to $20,000 a month nursing home bill, they're not thinking like, oh, the poor taxpayers. They're thinking like, what do I have to do to not pay this legally? And so just like you use tax professionals to lower your tax check that you have to write the IRS, I lower your long-term care, bill for care. It's the same thing. We're not doing anything illegal or unethical. If your moral compass, if you're the unicorn out there that that truly has money and says, mom's got $200,000 of assets and it's 20 grand a month in her nursing home. So I just feel that it's the right thing to do to spend it all down till she goes broke. Then more power to you. I'm not here to tell you that's wrong. In fact, probably the world needs more people like you. But the reality is, if the law gives us an opportunity to get the same care in the same facility and not pay full retail, I don't think we're horrible people for taking advantage of an opportunity that is written into the law. Now, in some states, and I get this on social media, like, you're terrible if you're recommending a Medicaid facility because they're all dungeons. Well, in some states, Medicaid facilities are actually run by the government, and they're not great places. Here in Florida, Medicaid's privatized. So you're in the same facility with the same food and the same care. The person in room one's paying 20 grand a month. The person in room two's on Medicaid paying 2 grand a month. They're getting the same care in the same facility. So because you are on Medicaid here in Florida, it is a subsidy, not substandard. So you're going to get the same facility, the same care. You're just going to get a government stipend to help you pay the bill or not. Choice is yours. And my job isn't to tell everybody what you should do, but merely to give you the tools in your toolbox that if you end up in a situation that you could take advantage of up to 64 hours a week of home care with no co-payments and no out-of-pockets, and still live in your own home and bring care in, maybe to help your spouse or maybe your adult child who's that 24/7 caregiver facing the burnout that caregivers face, to have up to 64 hours a week to just go take a walk and recharge your batteries, not a terrible idea. And it costs you nothing. And you've paid into the system. Why wouldn't you take advantage of the opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I just thank you for clarifying that. Like I said, it's weird because on the one hand, it's like, there are these things that are built in, like you said, that are legal processes that you can go through to make sure that the money gets in the right place. This is, and like in my mom's case, she was on Medicaid, still living at home. She had done the long-term care Medicaid plan, and she was able to stay in her home through Medicaid. And then when the time came for us to move her into a nursing home, and then I had to sell her house, part of what we had done with the elder law attorney was to make sure that she was able to stay on Medicaid even after I sold the house. We had the right documents in place. And then that allowed me to then use that money. It was still hers. I used it to enhance her experience at the
To
nursing
supplement her care and give her a better quality of life using her own assets.
Right. And so for us, it wasn't even a matter of like, making sure this stuff gets passed out. It was literally like, I want to make sure that all the money my mom has does in fact go to taking care of her. And in our case, if we had to spend that, it would have gotten spent either way, but it would have gone by a lot faster. And that's one of the reasons we ended up going into the nursing home. It's because we were already kind of pulling out of her what she had to pay for extra care on top of what Medicaid was sending her, and it was like, Mom, if you go home, we're gonna have 24-hour care. The money that is yours is going to be gone in 6 months. So you're not, in our case, it was like a matter of like, are we doing this now or are we going to do it in 6 months?
We do, for all of our families, we do what I affectionately refer to as the time to broke analysis. What is your monthly cash flow? What's your income? What are your expenses? How much are you paying for care? And how long will that money last you? And stress is terrible for everybody, whether it's caregiver stress or financial stress certainly doesn't help. And old people are always terrified of running out of money. And when you're in a situation where you need a lot of care, it's not just you're being a nervous Nelly, like you legitimately are going to run out of money. So I always give the example here in Florida for certain qualified veterans through the VA aid and attendance program. And I can do this nationwide, not just in Florida, although the rest of my practice is based in Florida. We can get up to $2,700 a month direct deposit tax-free from the VA to offset care costs. So a lot of times I have a family that comes to me and maybe they have 50 grand or 100 grand total assets. And both spouses are living on Social Security only at about $1,000 a month. And they got 100 grand in the bank and they both need assisted living. Well, here in Florida, you're not going to get one person in assisted living for 2 grand, much less two. So that bill becomes, $8,000, maybe $10,000. So I have the ability from using Florida Medicaid to get up to $2,000 for each spouse in addition to their income towards that bill. So now they each make 1,000. So I got 2,000 to work with. I can add another 4,000 between the two of them from Medicaid and another 2,700 for the two of them from VA. We can get them an extra $6,700 a month for the rest of their life to help pay for their care, adding their 1,000 a piece back into the mix, $8,700 a month. Now, maybe their bill's $10,000 a month. Okay, great. Well, now I'm only having to scrape the difference between $8,700 and $10,000, so $1,300 a month. Our $100,000 nest egg is going to last us a lot longer than if we were hemorrhaging $8,500 a month. And now they're out of gas in, 4 months, 6 months, they're broke versus, years. And so that peace of mind for them, that they're not being a burden on their family financially, peace of mind for the family members that don't have to worry, like, do I need to start liquidating my K to help pay for mom's care? No, mom actually did some pre-planning and she's now getting government benefits. So I don't have to take money off of my family's table to take care of my family member because they're able to be self-sufficient. And that's powerful.
Well, and I think you bring up another point, which is why I think planning is so important, however you do it. I always recommend, to caregivers, like at least make a phone call to an elder attorney, please just at least do that. At least see what's available to you before assuming that nothing is, or nothing's going to work, or it's not, whatever. You can have a conversation. But you bring up a point, and one of the reasons I think this is so important for us to do now as people caring for our parents, not only, maybe too late for our parents. They may not have planned well, and that's really terrible. And however, I want us to prepare better as people who will eventually need care. Everyone is either a caregiver, will be a caregiver, has been a caregiver, or will be in need of care. And so what I see happening to a lot of people now is because there wasn't enough planning, and sometimes it's due to like they don't want to go on Medicaid. There's a bunch of different reasons, but a lot of times, the caregiver that's an adult caregiver is tapping into their retirement. They're tapping into their assets, which there's nothing wrong with that. But then where does that leave you in your planning for yourself?
The negative domino effect, potentially.
Right. And so, I'm not saying it's wrong to, use your own assets to care for your family members. It's admirable and great. But I also want to make sure that we're considering what all of that might be doing to our future people who might be caring for us, or our future care needs in general. So I
would exhaust all possible benefits before dipping into your own pocket, because that money you can't get back. And so let's set it up. One thing to mention also, a lot of people are dealing with cognitive decline, dementia-related illnesses. At least here in Florida, and usually around the country, the attorney makes the decision, the elder law attorney makes the decision with respect to capacity. And simply being diagnosed with a memory care condition does not mean the moment you get that diagnosis that it is too late to plan. Because in Florida, as long as you understand who your family members or friends are, and you can tell me, like, that's my son, my daughter, my spouse, my friend, I trust them and I want them to help me make decisions. It doesn't matter if you don't know who the president is because your memory is not good. You are in the moment. And even people that are pretty far down a memory care condition have these things called lucid moments, where for some period of time, they're running on all cylinders. And so I always joke with my family as I say, listen, I don't care if mom doesn't remember me the next day, and maybe she'd prefer that. But the idea is if she is in the moment, I don't care if she doesn't remember the conversation the next day. If she can tell me, this is my family members, my friends, this is who I trust, even with a diagnosed condition, we can still get them to sign really powerful documents that give us that flexibility and control. to preserve money and coordinate assets.
And again, this is not about, tricking the loved one into signing something. Like you said, this is assessing whether or not they're lucid. And I know, like, my stepfather, he passed away in December of 2023 after having a fall and having to move into a nursing home because of a severe injury, and then including a brain injury. And he had times where he was fine and times where he wasn't. But ultimately, we were able to get him, where, like you said, he was having some great days strung together in a row. The lawyer came, met with him a couple of times. It was a very caring and compassionate situation, but that allowed my family members to be able to step in when my stepfather no longer could speak for himself. And I think that's the kind of thing that we want to be thinking about. That's the way we want to be thinking about it. That this is about, for a lot of people, and your job is to help people protect the assets, right? And our job as a caregiver is to be able to do the best job we can as a caregiver. And so I think both of these things can come together in this way to make sure that I'm able to have the resources and the paperwork I need to care for my mom, which included, while she was still with it cognitively until 6 months before she passed away. There were plenty of times where she was incapacitated due to emergency surgery, all this kind of stuff. And I had to show up at the hospital with the right documents to make sure that I could, and even with my name being on the HIPAA and everything, it was like, sometimes they want to be double sure, and say you want to make sure you have everything. And so all of that stuff is so much easier when you have it ahead of time, even if you're thinking it's decades before I'll ever need it, and I probably won't ever need it, and I don't know, it's like, well, wouldn't you rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it?
Yeah, you don't want to play the game of chicken with capacity, because car accidents happen, falls and brain injuries, strokes. People always think like, well, if I get diagnosed or if I start forgetting stuff, then I'll go see the lawyer. Well, that may work in a memory care condition, but a stroke could take your capacity away in the blink of an eye, and it's not coming back, and there's not good days. And then you get stuck with what you have, if anything. And so my thought is always, I want to be stuck with the most powerful, flexible documents that I can get my hands on, that does what it can to lower the stress level of my caregiving support team. Because the last thing that you need after being a full-time caregiver is pushback from the bank of like, oh, this document wasn't notarized properly, so our legal department says they're not going to honor it. And now you're like, okay, well, now I can't do what I need to do. The bills are due. I can't pay them. And, mom's had a stroke and I can't get her to sign a new document. Great. Now what do I do? That's stress on top of stress that the caregivers honestly don't need.
I mean, honestly, I have told people, I remember my mom would, she spent, and I know people that listen to this podcast regularly are so tired of me saying this, but, the last 5 years before she went into the nursing home, she went to the hospital 35 times in 5 years. We were in and out of rehabs and, all this kind of stuff. And then, we were dealing with, like I said, I was showing up with the right documents all the time. And people would be like, how are you managing all this? And I'm like, listen, the number one thing I can tell you is to make sure you have a plan. Make sure make sure your parents, call your 80-year-old mom right now and make sure, they have a plan, know what it is, all that kind of stuff. But then the second thing that I really felt too was, there were so many times where someone asked me, because I did have to step in for my mom because she was, on a ventilator or something. And they would say, what do you want to do? And I was able, because we had so many conversations with the elder care person, with the law offices, with each other, that I knew exactly what she would want. And I didn't have to try to remember or figure that out. And then also, because we had done some of the planning, when she did pass away, all of that stuff was already taken care of. We had already done that. So I didn't even have to make one phone call. They made one phone call and the rest was taken care of. I did not have to make any decisions except for what kind of keys at the reception. And I think I had already made that decision. They just were verifying that with me. And then, I could just deal with all the other stuff I had to deal with, but like, it was so much less stress because we had planned all this stuff ahead of time. And so that to me was the greatest gift that my mom gave me, was to be like knowledgeable enough, to be like, okay, we got to get this stuff. We got to make sure we have all our ducks in a row, because I need to make sure that I have the care I need and that we have the money to fund it. So it was just so important to me, which is why I keep harping on this.
Listen, and don't stop harping on it, because it truly, and sometimes people need to hear it 100 times before they act on it. But it's about efficiency. I do seminars every week, and I ask the question, has anybody been like the personal representative or the executor of a probate estate? And you get a couple of hands, and I always ask the question, how'd that go? And they're like, oh, it was terrible. Was it fun? No. Was it expensive? Yes. Do you wish your family member had structured their estate so that it was kind of on autopilot and you didn't have to be involved and hire lawyers and go to court and do all the stuff? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, okay, so you guys are the poster children of why I'm here today. We're going to talk about setting up your estate to be on autopilot so that, your beneficiaries get their stuff within 30 to 60 days, not 6 to 12 months through probate. And you're not losing potentially 10% of your net worth to the lawyers, courts, and judges who, if I was a betting man, you don't like as much as your family, friends, and charities. So why tee it up to cause stress and time consuming? If your children, a lot of people retire to Florida, their kids live in other states. They're having to fly to Florida, take time off work, away from their family, hire lawyers, go to court. That could have all been fixed for less money up front in a planning fee than burying your head in the sand and having to go through it after you pass away. So unless you're wired of like the screw it, I'll be dead then, who cares? Which occasionally I get those. I love them because I'll do their probate and make a bunch more money than the estate plan. But the reality is, you probably care about your family, friends, and charities more than unnamed lawyers and judges. So, I tell them, if you figure out a way to live forever, let me know. We're going to make a lot of money together. Other than that, it's going to happen, whether you want to talk about it, admit it, deal with it, or whatever. And since we don't have a crystal ball, we don't know if we knew the day we were going to pass away, properly motivated, we could bounce the last check and who cares? We had fun and no one had to administer our estate because there was nothing. But we usually don't get to pinpoint it down to the last check. And for that reason, planning ahead simply it's a gift to your family. And a gift to yourself, that what you've worked for and saved gets to where you want it, rather than getting sucked up in an administrative process that nobody appreciates, except for the lawyers. We make money on it.
Well, I thank you so much for diving into this topic with me. Like I said, you share a lot of great wisdom over on TikTok.
I thought that was just young people doing stupid dances on TikTok, but clearly there's some middle-aged people and some older people. It has become a very powerful marketing tool. But still, at its essence, it's I'm not there to sell anything. I'm there to educate. But what I find, people like you find me and they see a value in it. And, maybe they have a parent that's retired in Florida and all of a sudden they feel like they have a resource now. And so that's really my goal with it. But we always offer free consultations. Again, Florida only, except for VA benefits, which we do nationwide. But we'll review your documents for free, let you know the quality of them. If you need to make any changes, we can handle all that. So if you live in Florida, if you have a family member in Florida that may be getting older and not necessarily healthier, it would be a great opportunity for just a quick conversation. We can lay out a plan. And if you like it, we do business. If not, at least you leave more educated than when we found you.
Exactly. Thank you so much. That's great.
You're very
I'll link
welcome.
all that in the show notes. I appreciate you so much.
Awesome.
And thank you for joining me today on the From Guilt to Good podcast. To access additional caregiver resources, support our show, and connect with us on social, check out the show notes. We are changing the conversation around caregiving one episode at a time. Remember, you can still be a good caregiver and have a life